we're back on time, and that's a real help, so we can have a longer discussion later. I won't go over your points, Michael, but very much like to come back to you with some questions at the end of it. I suggest we go straight on to Amitabh from Indus Blue Consulting. Come and open it up for a sort of panel discussion at the end, if that's right. I hope I got the pronunciation right.
That's as close as you can get. There we go. That's not too bad at all. Good evening, everyone. And that's fantastic. I have to start by saying fantastic points made by Michael, I have to say. Because I think that we who come to, I've been in investment bank for about 18 years. And then since then, I've been with the UN and organizations such as the World Bank. And I find that this is a big issue that, no one's speaking each other's language. So Michael, thank you for making that point, because I think this is one part that I think people are really forgetting about quite a lot. But that's not what I'm here to speak about yet. If you've been anywhere for the last sort of couple of years, particularly, but before that as well, the UK is a great example. Plastics are appearing everywhere in discussion points. Plastic pollution is becoming a very major issue, I think, across the world. The UK finally has eventually got rid of plastics, single-use plastics quite a lot. That's great news as well. And then that's sort of continuing to go across the board. Now, why is this an important issue? Well, it's important because about 4.8 to 13 million tons of plastic are being dumped into the oceans every single year. And that's a lot of plastic. Just to give you a sort of magnitude feel to that, that's one of these big refuge collection trucks that you have. It's one of those in the oceans every minute. So that's a lot of stuff happening. And obviously that's going to affect a lot of the problems that we're having ecologically, marine life, ecosystems, literally choking the water and air being the two most important things as far as I'm concerned in the world. And of course, there's a degradation on health, poverty, vulnerable. So all of these are SDG related issues, and all of them are so interconnected that I don't think that yesterday's discussion or day before yesterday's discussion about health, in which I also work and I've been involved with the EMR Fund and things, they cannot be pulled apart from technology and the discussion in this area. So there are a lot of, obviously, costs within that as well. Problems, well, pretty much the same as everything else that we've been talking about. Undiversified funding sources. Pretty much all the financing from this comes from governments, waste collection and making sure that initiatives are in place to make sure that plastics are reduced and so forth, are very much based, not just financing-wise, but also policy-wise, by the governments. There's a certain amount of philanthropy in this area, of course, quite a lot of it actually. And now, over the last sort of years, a couple of years, certainly the multilaterals are making inroads into this. And I think this is a good thing because the multilaterals have, in my view, spearheaded a lot of the blended finance revolution. The other point that one of the other speakers earlier made was that in Asia, this seems to be a lot better known blended finance, a lot better understood. For us, ex-bankers and KPMG and others, we think of structured finance, and many of the private sector people might also understand that a little better. So that's one issue. Certainly the other problems are that there aren't enough pipelines. So we keep talking about finance, and this is blended finance by STIs, but it's not really the finance that's the problem very often, it's the pipelines. And so that's a big issue, because without that, we can't unlock innovative mechanisms such as blended finance as well. Now, I think knowledge and awareness, everyone's mentioned. I won't go into that too much, but that really needs updating quite a lot. I was on a call earlier today where multilaterals, foundations, and actually organizations involved in the plastic pollution sector were talking. And honestly, you could see that there was a lot of lack of knowledge within that. So people like the WEF and these kind of forums are really helping in sort of bringing that up, because the more people understand, the more they can finance as well. So all of these sort of things are there. And of course, adequacy of revenue streams. One of the most difficult areas within R&D and also within here is that it's a public good at the end of the day, what we're talking about, typically waste management and other things. And so really that becomes a problem in terms of revenue streams. And so for blended finance, I feel that if there is going to be an investor base, they're obviously going to be looking towards the security, one, of credit enhancements and having sort of the multilaterals and the concessional finance below you. But also above that, they're going to be looking for other forms like sort of revenue streams as well. So key part of the equation still remains how to try it in the private sector and the public financial institution sector as well. So how to make these things bankable and investable again. Now, The problem apart from the ecological side is the cleanup, the repair, the financial cost of that, the loss of revenues in the tourism side, businesses, fisheries, and so forth as well. Just to give you an idea in terms of numbers, because numbers are a big deal, $2.5 trillion a year is lost due to plastics pollution. That's quite a lot of money, and certainly then bears a lot of attention into what we're trying to do here as well. Now, as with healthcare, as we've been discussing that a lot, prevention is better than the cure. And, systematic innovation, high quality scientific research to treat the causes in a more economically viable way is really the key to all of this. And, the big deal that keeps coming up is 3Rs: reduce, reuse, recycle. These are the sort of things that are bringing people to the fore. And that's private sector. That is, in fact, investor bases, and also other sort of organizations, I guess. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger has got involved now, so that's obviously a good sign. I think that from all these perspectives, within what we're trying to do, the problem still is from one point, and that is knowledge. We don't know enough about pollution, and certainly not about plastics pollution, how it works, how it dissipates, and so forth, to be able to find correct solutions for it. And that's why STI, the science, technology, and innovation, is so much more important in this field. Also, it's the kind of the disregarded younger brother of green financing in many ways. And so really, from that perspective as well, it needs to be brought up. Now, science, technology, and innovation are by far probably the most important things in dealing with this problem. And hence, blended finance, being an important part of being able to finance that, is going to be important as well. I've just put in 3 examples of what's happening in terms of these areas. Technology, there is something going on at the moment with satellite observation of ocean plastics to see where it is, where it's flowing, and how to stop it, and how to sort of take it out, fixing the problem, as it were. There's a lot of money going into that. Artificial intelligence to try and understand natural systems and try and see how scientific solutions can be put together for that. Not enough money going into that, but needs to be. And innovation, lots of it. There's this financial innovation going to blockchain, sort of secure digital tokens. And even yesterday in the UK, we just come out with something from a great company called Zampla, which is using vegetables and other sort of similar biodegradable things to make substitutes for plastic bags, right? And now, why is it interesting from blended finance point of view? The entire financing for these kind of things, particularly this example I've just given you, is coming from the VC world. Now, the VC world is not something you'd ordinarily see in R&D world in such a big way, because you don't know the values of debts that we've spoken about and so forth. So it's quite interesting, because clearly there is a big market for this. There is a private sector market. Think about all the washing machine, the laundry detergents, the face creams, all that kind of stuff, water bottles. All of this would have to take on, if the correct tax policies, if the correct government policies, and those kind of things come in, to make sure that people are forced to adopt these kind of technologies, which are not going to kill the environment. So there is a financial argument and a very good business case to be made for that as well. And hence, blended finance could be very interesting. That's why over the last sort of year at least, despite COVID, you're seeing the advent of blue funds. Blue bonds are certainly in the making as well at the moment. Viability gap funding, sovereign budgets, and all of these are really focused towards looking for capital market investors. So that's also very interesting from what Michael was saying earlier about the investor bases needing to be a little bit more, I guess, brought up to speed on what's happening here, because then if they understand, you're talking about a market for finance, which is a lot bigger than anything else that we can sort of think about within that. Now, what role does sort of blended finance have to play within that? Well, there's several. Clearly, with the private sector and getting them on board in terms of innovation in the area, R&D costs a lot of money, and we've seen the difficulties of doing that with the AMR thing. However, with AMR even, we've managed to get money for R&D despite the larger valleys of death. I don't think those valleys of death are as high within the plastics and the pollution world. So there is then definitely a role for blended finance to bring those kind of people inside as well. In terms of sort of catalyzing funds for manufacturing, pilot schemes, and so on and so forth, to just show how it could work and how the potential is there to make it with revenue streams and things in the background. Capital markets and impact investors. Now, a lot has been spoken about. I was in the group earlier about impact investing as well. Very interesting. What people are not realizing is also that general populations around the world are getting very interested in green, in pollution, and so forth. And the COVID is one example of how that's happening, and other, massive catastrophes that are happening around the world. Now, pension funds, investment funds, and institutional investors all need to get your money, my money. Now, if one of the ways that they can attract that money into their funds to go and invest further is by saying, listen, we are investing in blue or in green or in other sort of good impact related things, then this is a benefit to them. So I think that needs to be spoken to a little bit more. And I think that, also environmentally focused funds alone may not be able to do something here. It needs to be a much wider audience and a much wider investor base that comes into it. And I think that, other things that have been spoken about, AMCs, offtake agreements and so forth, those kind of innovative instruments, along with something like this, could help quite a lot in that. Most importantly, however, I really think that the role is of getting investors comfortable. Again, I have to refer back to Michael on this. This is a new asset class, right? I mean, blue is a new asset class as far as a lot of investors are placed. So do we first need to re-manage the communication of that to say, okay, listen, this is not a new asset class. This is kind of part of green. And so the money that goes into that, the risks that go into that are similar to what's happening over here. So that is the kind of, at the early stages, if blended finance can come in on a capital structure in a much weightier way, from the more concessional finance, and then hopefully that tapers off as those risks get more relaxed and more understood by investors. I think that's a great idea. Revenue streams are clearly lacking in this area, and these are challenges certainly. So, how do we create revenue streams? They don't need to come from plastics. Yeah, blended finance is a great flexible instrument that can use shadow streams of income, for example, to be able to fund what they're trying to do there. So we need to think a little wider to say, okay, listen, in this particular area, there may not be revenues easily accessible, but what about neighboring? Plastics go and actually impact poverty and women and other issues, children, so forth. So health, why don't we get monies from those different directions as well? So that's one challenge and a solution for that as well. I think talking the language, risk and return, I've sat in too many investor discussions where the question comes up, okay, we're doing good, I understand that, I'm an investor at the end of the day, tell me what is my risk and where is my return? And if you look at the World Bank's pandemic bond for COVID, that's been quite famous over the last couple of months at least, that's really where there's been a lack. That was not explained to investors. Hey, this is the risk. This is how you could lose money. And that's why the second version of that has been delayed, certainly. So that talking the language, frank exchange and understanding, very, very important as well. And of course, the point about credit enhancements that's been made over and over again. What kind of credit enhancements are needed in this particular sector to get science and technology and innovation up and running for something so specific as plastics pollution? Right, so that's it. But there are bright lights out there as well. It's not just all challenges. We have already got funds out there that are running, things like the Ocean 5 Fund, which is specifically, 5 philanthropists come together focusing on oceans. That's quite good. It's highlighting the issue. It's also bringing other investors in as well. We do have examples where revenues are possible. So this idea of Zampla, for example, that I said yesterday, they've created a substitute. They got VC money to create a substitute for plastics. Why would VC go into this? VCs would go into this because they see enormous potential for revenue streams out of this, right? So clearly there are revenue streams. The question is, how do we find them and how do we communicate them across to the investor bases in blended finance particularly? I think I probably should stop around that area because I'm getting close to my time. But I think certainly a lot of the work that we are doing in blended finance, I think for me stems from the structured finance world. The fact that it's flexible, the fact that it's not, many people have said this is not defined correctly or, it's not been defined at all. The whole beauty about blended finance is that it doesn't need to be defined. It can be flexible. It can accommodate a lot of different kinds of financing, a lot of different kinds of risks, and at different times in a project lifestyle. So that's, I think, what I think we should also focus on. Let's try and bring in projects that showcase how they can work within different kind of fields. And I think that particularly within the plastics field, because I'm working within that, I think that this is a conversation that's happening a lot now at WEF, in Asia particularly, because this is not just about marine and marine populations. This affects everyone. It's not just oceans, it's also lakes, it's rivers, and so forth. And if those are choked, it's going to have an adverse effect on lots of things. So financing from foundations, philanthropy can easily blend very well with multilaterals, governments, and the private sector as well. So on that, I think I'll leave it, and I guess the next speaker and questions at the end, I guess.
Amitabh, thanks very much indeed. It's great to hear a sort of separate field to what we often hear about there, where the challenges are similar. Let's go straight on to Alexandra, if we can, from OECD, and then we'll come